Hey guys, Jay here. So today I'm here to share my experiences living with the relatively new Eversolo F-10 amplifier and a few findings to get the most out of this amplifier. The Eversolo F-10 is a Class AB amplifier, ideally meant to be paired with the Eversolo DMP-A10, but also the DMP-A8 and the A6 as well. All three streamer, DAC, and preamplifier all-in-one units by Eversolo that has been very popular by many due to its rich features, intuitive UI, and sound quality for the money. The Eversolo streamer all-in-one units do have a reputation for being really great value for the money, and that is no exception with the Eversolo F-10 as it's packed with value inside. But let's come back to that later. First, let's take a quick look at the design choices made here. Outside of the fact that the F10 is slightly taller than the DMP-A10, the overall form factor and the build quality is quite similar. While it may not be the most eye-catching amplifier on the block, and I do question their decision to put two logos in the front, it does show clear, consistent design language from Eversolo, such as the consistent logo placement, form factor, and of course, the VU meter. And about that VU meter, maybe it's just me, but I find it a little bit skippy, twitchy, whatever you want to call it. Here's what I mean. If you compare it side by side, even the digital meter on the DMP-A10 is much more consistent and less jittery than the one on the amplifier. Of course, this is not as noticeable when you're listening distance away, but when you move up close, it is pretty visible. I do really like the back of this unit. It has both XLR and RCA inputs and very clearly labeled. Two additional features here worth mentioning. Sensitivity refers to the gain of the amplifier. 23 dB is standard, but 29 dB can be used if you have demanding speakers. And the switch here labeled stereo and mono options here in case you wanted to get two of these to bridge them to be used as monoblocks instead of a single stereo amp. In stereo mode, the F10 is capable of delivering 200 watts into 8 ohms, 320 watts into 4 ohms, and 450 watts into 2 ohms. Having two of the F10 in bridge mono mode gives you 650 watts into 8 ohms and 950 watts into 4 ohms. Eversolo also reports respectable THD figures and damping factor for the F10. Now that's a lot of power to drive most speakers in the market, with impressive specs as well, but I feel like the real value is under the hood of this amplifier. Inside the hood, you can find the linear power supply with humongous toroidal transformers with respectable amounts of filtering to reduce any unwanted DC noise, and also a 5 MOSFET transistor used per side, totaling 10 MOSFET transistors with again respectable bank of capacitors for the reservoir. These capacitors are labeled Eversolo, but they look quite familiar to the AudioNote Kaisei capacitors at first glance, but that would be pretty insane for the price of this amplifier. The F10 also utilizes dual differential amplifier design as well as unique preamp modules which can help to reduce noise and increase dynamic range. I will also note that the circuit board is of higher quality than I usually see at this price range and above. For my sound comparisons, I decided to use the Platimon VC1 and the VC2 bottom module, as these are my main speakers and I am very familiar with them by now. But of course, I tried various different speakers such as the very highly acclaimed Buckhart S400 Mark II, Orendo 1528 bookshelves, which are the best value in my mind, and the incredibly unique Acora Acoustic MRC speakers. The first thing that I did was compare the Eversolo F10 to the previous F2 amplifier, which was a collaboration between Eversolo and Stark Sound. Now this is a Class D amplifier, and I did find that the F10 really excelled in every category. There was really no comparison with the F2. So I moved on and decided to compare with my favorites under $2,000 price point, which is the Galleon TSA A75 and the Adcom 555MS. And while these amplifiers were no slouch in the bass, the Eversolo F10 to me was a clear winner in terms of how visceral the bass was, how textured, how deep, and how punchy the bass was on the Eversolo. Overall, I found the Eversolo F10 to have a warm, easygoing, smooth type of sound with rich fullness to the overall bass and mid-range, and along with a more forgiving high frequency, I found it to be a more easy match with speakers like the Platimon VC1 and VC2 and the MRC speakers from Acora Acoustic. I found from my past experiences that matching wrong amplifiers to these particular speakers can be quite disastrous, as the sound can become overly clinical and lifeless and too brittle and bright and unforgiving to the recordings. But a good match like with the F10 makes the high frequencies not at all fatiguing to listen to while still being able to appreciate the freakishly great nuances and micro details of these speakers. I will also add that with particular speakers like this, the Eversolo F10's overall warmth, the thickness, and the extra kind of fullness added in the bass and the mid-range really added to that musicality and the musical experience, allowing me to hear the music in a more enjoyable way, as I really do like that more thicker sound than a thin type of sound. However, on the flip side, on speakers that are a little bit more warmer and richer and more neutral, for example, like the Orendo 1528 bookshelves that tend to be more neutral, and the Picard S400 Mark II that tends to be a little bit more warmer and richer sounding, I was left wanting a little bit more. Not in terms of the bass was quite frankly really fantastic, but when it came to the nuances and the micro details and the high frequency extension and the airy presentation that I was looking for, didn't quite happen with the F10, as I found those high frequency details to be a little bit too subdued for my liking. And on those speakers, I prefer the Yalion TSA A75 as well as the Adcom 555 MS more. However, this is where the pro tip comes along. I was playing around with the Eversolo DMP-A10 and the F10 combination, and I found that turning on the loudness contour as well as playing around with the PEQ a little bit really made wonders, especially with warm and neutral sounding speakers. Once I configured my setting to my liking, I personally prefer the F10 over the Adcom or even the Yalion when it came to even warm and neutral speakers. However, of course, the catch here is that you would need the Eversolo's streamer all-in-one units like the DMP-A10, A8, or the A6. Not just because of these functions, but the F10, generally speaking, makes a great match to the Eversolo streamers. Because synergistically speaking, they match each other's sound characteristics fairly well. The Eversolo streamers, as you may know, is more detail-oriented and can be a little bit clinical at times, while the Eversolo F10 is the total opposite, giving that warmth and smoothness and easygoing sound, and marry those together and you get a more balanced kind of presentation. And this combination is seriously not to be underestimated because when I compared it to much more pricey offerings, such as the Harmony Gonfet monoblocks from Live, as well as the new Accuphase E3000, I didn't find that the Eversolo fell behind at all. In fact, in a lot of cases, I actually prefer the Eversolo, and if I had a problem, I had some settings and flexibility within the DMP-A10 to adjust for those factors, which made it almost feel like I was giving the Eversolo an unfair advantage when comparing to these amplifiers. But with no setting in regard, still the Eversolo F10 still competes with these amplifiers head to toe, even though I did end up preferring the Live Harmony Gonfet monoblocks, which had similar sound characteristics, with equally if not more impressive bass textures and nuances, but also the layering and the more grand soundstage. However, for the Accuphase E3000, I preferred the E3000 with more warm and neutral speakers compared to the F10, while I prefer the F10 with more brighter, more detail-oriented, nuance-based speakers. One thing I really have to give to the E3000 though is that the soundstage was still more grand than the Eversolo. So in the end, I did find the Eversolo F10 to go head to toe with much more pricey offerings with similar characteristics, but I did find that the more pricey offerings like the Accuphase or the Live Harmony monoblocks to have a more layered sound and a more grand soundstage. But I don't think it is a stretch that the Eversolo F10 can be called a more budget-conscious option to the Gonfet monoblocks from Live Harmony or even the Accuphase E3000, as these three have similar qualities about them in that they have a thicker mid-range, great bass and textures, and a more forgiving high frequency. But one thing is for sure though, the F10 was the warmest sounding of the bunch, without touching any settings inside the Eversolo DMP-A10 of course. So ultimately, who is this amplifier for? Well, I think for everyone that has an Eversolo streamer, this is a kind of a no-brainer because they mate so well synergistically, and you get the functions within the amp, the DSP and the PEQ settings to really cater that sound to what you like and with your speakers. However, my strongest recommendation would go towards the people that have speakers like the Platimon, the Acora Acoustic MRC, the Magicos, the Focals, speakers that are detail oriented, that has great nuance, but can get fatiguing and bright at times with wrong matching amplifiers. The Eversolo F10 manages to keep all the details and nuances that you like about both speakers while thickening up that mid-range and that bass to have more textures and more in amount. So which I found to be a lot more pleasing to listen to without sacrificing, once again, that detail and nuance that I love already about these speakers. And again, I'm repeating myself here, but I think it's important. The reason I like the Eversolo F10 so much is not just because it's a warm sounding amplifier, which goes perfectly with my preference, but also the fact that it doesn't take away anything about these speakers I already like in terms of its detail and nuance and airy presentation in the high frequency of speakers like Platimon, Aqua Acoustic, MRC, and so on and so forth. Instead, they just fatten up that mid-range and that bass texture and amount in the bass, making everything sound more pleasurable, more musical to my ears, and allows me to listen for longer periods of time. Even though I'm getting all these details, I'm not necessarily getting bright fatigued. I may get detail fatigued because of so much detail that's coming at me, but it's well layered and well separated within the soundstage, which gives this nice illusion of micro details and micro dynamics, which gives a perfect balance of what I'm looking for in my system. And of course, it can be a different story with warm sounding speakers that can sound a little bit too dull, but with these settings in the Eversolo's streamer all-in-ones, that can quickly change as well. So it's a very flexible kind of, streamlined kind of setup that they have come up with, and I think they did a really, really amazing job. So that's pretty much it from me. I hope this video was helpful and entertaining. And if it was, consider clicking that like button and subscribing. I know I hate asking for it too, but it helps my channel a lot and it only takes a second. So please consider it and thank you in advance. And I'll see you guys on my next video. Until next time.